Greetings, you curiouser and curiouser Herle Burly-ites. Remember about 15 years ago when the publicly troubled at the time actor Charlie Sheen went viral for invoking the word winning all over the place and in some pretty odd ways, even when he wasn't winning? Well, Charlie's past that now, but let me submit that our guest today has full rights to that word. Modesty aside, maybe he gets it tattooed on a non-discrete part of his person. A little bit of room up there on the forehead, I see. Veteran PC and Conservative Party campaign manager Steve Outhouse joins us today. He just managed Premier Tony Wakeham's majority-winning campaign a couple of weeks ago in Newfoundland. Premier Smith's UCP majority victory in Alberta. Sandwiched in between there was Blaine Higgs' campaign in New Brunswick, so nobody's 100% perfect. Steve hails from Freeport, Long Island in southwest Nova Scotia. He worked in various comms roles in the Harper government before moving on to helm 3 federal CPC leadership campaigns, as well as provincial leadership campaigns in Nova Scotia, PEI, and the aforementioned Newfoundland and Labrador. He's the founder of the Just Campaigns consultancy and says he's, quote, a bad business person. But winning elections isn't exactly bad for business. We'll talk today a little bit more about Steve's background, about what animates his political life. Then we'll do a deep dive into modern campaign mechanics, what works today and what doesn't. I want his thoughts on hot button issues and how best to use them. And then, and this is particularly relevant because he was chief of staff to Pierre Poilievre prior to 2015, what advice would Steve give to the federal Conservatives? So Steve Outhouse, thanks for joining us. It's great to have a chance to talk to you.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Where are you right now?
I am in beautiful St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay. So I have a tick now about Newfoundland,
Okay.
which is I read something a few months ago. And I can't believe I was 63 years old before I encountered this thought, but it's the funniest thing I've heard. And that
Okay.
is that surely the person who named Newfoundland was using that as a placeholder.
Until a newer land
Until
was
somebody actually came up with a name and nobody ever bothered to come up with a name.
it's like it's always Canada's new government, and then later on it's something different.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yes.
So congratulations on that victory. Came as a surprise to the people I was talking to. Were you surprised?
Well, we were hopeful, but I mean, we didn't know what was, going to happen. I mean, we had mapped out our path to victory. It had the odds of it had increased in recent months from what we could see, from what we were getting at the doors and so on. But we knew that the seats were going to be very close, and then obviously one of them we only won by 18 votes. We ended up having a lot of seats break our way, and so it could have easily gone the other way. But it was really at the beginning of the night, the results were not looking good, and I was ready to just sort of quit and walk away from it all and say, clearly I can't read data. This is a mistake, and uh, but it pivoted around, and the end of the night was a lot better. So, was it a surprise? Well, I mean, yes, because we were aiming for it and hoping for it, but until you actually get the results, you don't know what the voters are going to do.
It's true, but you said I didn't know for sure. And is that because you can't do the same kind of polling that you can do in Newfoundland that you might do nationally, where you would have a fair degree of certainty about what's going to happen election night?
Yeah, I mean, that is perhaps part of it. And I'll be honest, I mean, I am not great to talk about polling. I mean, that's obviously something much more in your area of expertise than mine. We did a lot of polling in Alberta as well, and um, there was a lot of different, getting down to the seat level specificity is very difficult, I think, in sort of any, province, and you use a lot of modeling and so on. People smarter
Yeah.
than me do that. We were doing our polling, I guess, door to door, and taking all that in as voter ID and asking people about their issues and asking people about who they were supporting. And so, in Newfoundland and Labrador, having worked here during the leadership as well for Mr. Wakeham, there is a little bit more of a tendency in Atlantic Canada for people to kind of sometimes be a little bit nicer to you at the doors, just to be very polite, and they want to be friends with a lot of people. And so, based on our data, we knew it could be true and could happen. But yeah, there was no what little bit of polling we could do was largely landline and largely seniors, and so we were very limited in what sort of formal polling we could get done.
Right. Um, why do you think it happened? Why did people vote for change in Newfoundland?
Well, it was actually there was a little bit of a mirror image, I guess, of the New Brunswick campaign from the year before, and I was able to kind of see it. I mean, this was a government that was 10 years old. There was tiredness. We were hearing at the doors, and the PC team here when they went through several by-elections. First, it was, they would go and knock on doors and hear Trudeau's got to go. Then that changed, but the Liberals got to go sentiment didn't really leave. At love. So, news for us. There was fatigue. Any government after 10 years, look, you're governing, you're making decisions, you're bound to, tick off
Yeah,
people
yeah,
and
yeah,
not do
for
things
sure.
right. And it sort of piles up over time and it gets harder and harder to come back from that. And so that fatigue that was there, especially outside of Metro St. John's, so that was really something working for us. And we did attach that tagline to a lot of our comms pieces about after 10 years, the Liberals have got to go, and that was because we were hearing it at the doors, and so we just sort of amplified it and repeated it back to people. So that was a big part of it, and the other part too, I do think that there was a miscalculation on the Liberal camp or Liberal campaign side is that they really wanted to make the whole thing about the deal with Quebec and the memorandum of understanding on the hydro agreement. And what little bit of research we were able to do, and again, I mean, I would make you cringe as a pollster if I showed you the data and how it was gathered and what we were able to get done. It just showed there was a bell curve there, which was the small group of people who were really strongly for it, and all of those people were strong Liberal supporters. There was a slightly larger group that were strongly against it, and all of those were deep blue Tory supporters. And then this whole middle section were swing voters, like people who had voted Liberal last time but were open to voting for the PCs this time. And their overriding answer was, I need more information before I can make up my mind on this. It's a complex issue. It's a 50-year long agreement. People in Newfoundland and Labrador have a lot of concerns because of the existing agreement that's there and locking in for that long. So the Liberals actually gave us, oddly enough, a nice lane to drive in, which was we just need to evaluate this and do an independent review, which they had refused to do, which was again another, I think, would have been an easy win for them to do, and just say we're going to take our time with it and do it right and not rush into it. And people were very open to that message, and so trying to make the campaign about a thing that the vast majority of swing voters weren't sure on. But we also found through what little research we could do, and definitely was coming up the doors. Healthcare was the number one issue. Cost of living, a close second. So for people to say this is an election about a huge document and a deal with Quebec that's going to lock us in for 50 years on hydro, and we got to get it done right away. Just that wasn't moving people, to say, well, I'm ready to overlook the healthcare, mess here, and I really want to get this in. It was an odd sort of layering. They had both their record, and then they had this new thing in the window that just people didn't really latch onto. So it left an opening for us for sure.
I'm still feigning this week that I know a thing or two about AI, which I really don't. But my role here is to demystify some of the key components of our presenting sponsor TELUS's Sovereign AI Factory. And so I gamely press on, becoming progressively less uninformed. Pretty much my basic philosophy in life, Herle Burly-ites. Today we're talking about GPUs, graphic processing units. TELUS's Sovereign AI Factory in Rimouski has state-of-the-art GPUs from the world's leading chip designer, NVIDIA. NVIDIA's latest Hopper supercomputers power the entire operation and enable faster AI model training and advanced inference capabilities. But what exactly are these GPUs, and why are they so special? Let me start with a massively abridged history lesson. Back in the 70s, GPUs were first used in arcade video games to render digital images and improve computer graphics. Think asteroids. Now, you'll find the hardware in your phone, computer, and a ton of other technologies we use every day. Because as the technology advanced, it was discovered GPUs were pretty amazing at quickly solving complex calculations and processing other non-graphic data. Today's most advanced GPUs can process huge amounts of data and perform the most complex computations in the blink of an eye, trillions of operations per second, which, of course, makes them integral to AI, the brain, as it were. The human brain, by way of contrast, can hold about 7 items in working memory at once, two entirely different scales of cognition. The Herle brain, by the way, strives for 7 items of working memory. Who's our presenting sponsor again? I'm kidding. I know it's TELUS. That was me just being cagey about getting their name in again at the end of an ad. The Liberals did change their leader. The Premier resigned, and they had a new person running for Premier. Would you have beaten Fury too, or would Fury have been a tougher competition?
It would have been a lot tougher. It was Fury had a personal popularity. I mean, it was enough that they had run their last election on that strategy. I mean, they basically banished the word liberal from their signs and their literature. It was all Team Fury, different colors, less red, more black. You know, all these things. They were running as far away from the liberal brand as they could. So at the beginning of the year, I mean, and look, we were on high alert from January onwards or late December onwards, and trying to get things ready. And we'd heard that the Liberals had their bus ready to go, and their whole plan was to go in and have this session during the early January, and then drive the bus up and march off to victory. I think it could have been a real possibility if they had gone at that point in time, to be just honest about it. The change, it was a little bit of a reverse situation from the federal Liberals, who took a deeply unpopular leader and brought in someone new who was sort of fresh, and was able to kind of step into the moment, as I know you've talked about on the show many times. And in this situation, uh, Mr. Hogan did not catch fire. It sort of leveled out the leadership, question, and so it really came down to Team Red versus Team Blue, and that's where them playing onto the fatigue of the Liberals of 10 years and so on, really opened up. So yeah, if they hadn't changed, would it be a different result? I'd like to think we still could have, gutted it out, but we don't know. But it definitely would have been tougher, 100%.
Interesting. Let's take a step back and talk about you a little bit. You have an interesting political origin story, as I understand it, because you were a bureaucrat, you were an official, and you got seconded to work in a minister's office when Prime Minister Harper got elected. And now I have seen many ministers' offices with seconded bureaucrats. And in almost all cases, those bureaucrats have nothing but contempt for the political hacks they are encountering in the minister's office, right? You had a different approach. You decided you were a political hack and you decided to
Yeah.
join. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so I had been within the federal public service. I mean, it started as a co-op student in '96, and then graduated university in '98, and had gone into media relations. What was the former? I mean, now it was Indigenous Affairs, and was a departmental spokesperson there for several years, and then went over to Fisheries and Oceans. And in 2006, when the Harper Conservatives won, yeah, I was asked, because I was a media person, if I could go up and help out, for 2 weeks
Yep.
while they were staffing up. And I fell in love with it almost instantly. I mean, it's just a rush. It's you get to help make decisions. You're around decisions being made, and just politics was a lot of fun. I guess, if I'm just
It
breaking it
is.
down to
It
that,
is.
it
That's why I
is.
have a
Yeah.
show about it. Yeah.
And some of us even watch it,
Yeah.
and but we yeah, and so at first I was told. So I remember, the Minister Hearn, who was the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, asked me if I'd like to stay on, and so my wife and I went out for dinner and talked it through, and said, well, we can take a leave of absence for a year, and still have my position later. And she said, and this was 2006, sure, we can do anything for a year. And now here I am talking to you in 2025, and I look forward to seeing my wife again soon. So, so we and then after the first year, and we've been told that we could renew our leave of absence and everything. And I'd been in the bureaucracy long enough. I'd certainly seen under the former both Chrétien and Martin regimes, public servants there, and they just seemed to be able to stretch that out. And of course, one of the commitments that
Get a
our government
charrette.
had made was Yeah, there's no more. Yeah, and there was no. But we shut the revolving door, and of course, I was on one side of the revolving door, and I had to
Yeah.
decide whether I wanted to go back or stay there. And I remember meeting with the HR person and just being kind of incredulous and say, "But you told us we could stay." And she's like, "Yes, I understand, but you can't." So we had to decide. There were actually three of us at that time who all gave up our public service, jobs for life and pension and the golden handcuffs and all those things, and decided this is it. Like we enjoy this, and we're gonna stay here. And so that's what happened.
So, did you already know that you were a conservative and just got excited about politics? Or did you also have to decide you were a conservative?
So that was an interesting part of my past too, which I haven't talked about a whole lot. But so I was a liberal at one point in time. I would have identified as a liberal,
All thinking
and
people are at some point.
at some point, and then we get a bit older, I guess. I don't know, but what we so I mean, I had just minor involvement, but it was at the time, and I will give full credit to you and Prime Minister Martin. I was very animated by the deficit reduction activity that was going on. I remember being in university when that was happening and watching the deficit come down every year, and I felt it was sort of a national challenge that we were tackling, and it was really aligned with it. Of course, that was because I was a fiscal conservative. A person of faith, though. However, I remember going to church and people saying, "How can you be a liberal?" I'm like, "I feel totally at home. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not really my main driving force in terms of how I vote and so on. I sort of align with these priorities." So fast forward to a few years later, I believe it was probably maybe you drumming me out of the Liberal Party when you said, people with my values, couldn't be prime minister and so on. So anyway, I probably jumped into something more than I should there. But I had identified, and
No,
so about
first of
that
all, let's
point,
explore that. What are you referring to precisely? Because
well, there was. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, because it was under Trudeau that it was that people that don't believe in choice can't run for the
Right.
Liberals. That we had a lot of people in the Martin caucus that believed in that were pro-life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it was and maybe I was misinterpreting, and maybe this is all a big mistake, and I've made life choices based
yeah,
on misunderstanding your messaging. But it was I believe in the leading into the '04 campaign, and Prime Minister Martin talking about Stephen Harper, and the implication was that he was pro-life, and
right.
therefore anyone with that value should not be prime minister of the country.
I hear you. We've
And
been
that
running against
that
that for
landed.
years. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I understand that the political like the it was kind of the first time a wedge issue was used on me, and I was like, oh well, I guess I'm
Mm.
on this side of the wedge. And again, was not my major driving force in my political ideology or how I went. I kind of saw those as separate things, as many would. Exactly why many liberals at that time could be pro-life and be within the caucus, because it wasn't sort of a major
Yeah.
issue that they had to come down on. But I just remember thinking, oh well, if this is how they feel, then maybe I might want to run someday, and I guess I couldn't really be welcome there. And so that sort of made me start to look at other things and go, yeah, well, maybe I am a bit more conservative than I thought. And certainly on the fiscal side for sure, and some of the crime issues and so on like that. So when by the time '06 rolled around, I wasn't involved in partisan politics at all. I was still in the public service. And when the Conservatives won, I just remember being extremely happy and extremely excited, and I felt it was sort of a new time, and I thought about getting involved, and I said no, I'm not gonna, I won't do that. I'm sure they have all the people they need. They've just won an election, not understanding the background at all about how an election is run with like a smaller group of people, and then you spiral that out to whatever 20 ministers' offices and a PMO and everything, and there's they need more people. And I do know that I was looked at with a lot of suspicion when I came in, because I was former bureaucrat, and I had to go through a process of talking to people and asking why I wanted to help and everything. And but I was very fortunate that people gave me a chance.
Yeah. Well, you aren't the only person that walked away from Martin over choice. His priest also stopped giving him communion. So um, there's that. So there used to be a police chief in Ottawa who had a thing about Halloween. He used to call reporters and suggest parents hold Halloween parties at home or in community centers instead of letting their kids go door to door. He thought trick or treating was nuts. He just couldn't imagine why anyone would let their children wander around at night, often by themselves, walking in the street accepting candy from strangers. What's the matter with people? He'd ask. Well, our trusty chief is gone now, and kids are still wandering around at night on October 31st, often walking in the street accepting candy from strangers. It's a ritual. We live in the world. There's risk in everything. All we can do is be sensible and pay attention to basic safety. Our sponsor, CN, is sort of obsessed with safety, and it has a few suggestions: reflective gear, reflective tape, glow sticks, flashlights. Those LED lights cyclists use that you can see a mile away. Make sure your kids can be seen by motorists and train operators. Costumes shouldn't trail behind kids. They can get caught where they ought not to. And masks shouldn't block sight or hearing. If there are train tracks in your neighborhood, please make sure your kids stay away from them, far away, even if they lie across a shortcut. Sometimes you don't know a train is coming until it's in front of you. And you have heard me say it here before, it takes a minimum 18 football fields in length to bring a train to a complete stop. If you must cross tracks, do it at a marked pedestrian or roadway crossing. Don't use cell phones or earbuds around tracks. And for heaven's sake, don't pose for pictures around train tracks or use them as a venue for any sort of Halloween prank. Trains never take the night off. Never. Not on Halloween, not on Christmas, not ever. That said, CN wishes your kids a great Halloween. May they all be safely gorging themselves on gooey treats the next day. You worked for a lot of ministers in the Harper government, and as I can look at the list, they seem to span the ideological spectrum that exists within the Conservative Party, from what I would consider to be moderates, people that might have been comfortable in the old PC party, to people that are reformers. What kind of conservative are you?
It's a great question because I don't really know. Like when I first joined, I wasn't even aware of all the labels that, that came about, and until someone called me a social conservative one day, and I was like, oh, like what does that even mean? I guess it's because I went to church. So I just didn't know. Like I didn't get into. I was one of the folks who kind of joined the new Conservative Party of Canada. So it was I'd seen the legacy parties at work. I'd seen them come together, and then of course went from opposition into the minority situation in '04, and then the victory in '05, '06. So I just came in being a Conservative Party supporter, and I didn't find it strange at all that there would be people with different views on different topics, and also I just understood hierarchy, and I understood that the leader had run on a platform that said that we would not be touching these issues and we would be talking about these issues. And so I had chosen to come into the party understanding that this is what we were doing and this is what we were not doing. I didn't feel any conflict in being there, and I didn't have a special label for myself. So yeah, I've worked well, and I continue to work well with people, I think, across the spectrum, I guess, and within the big blue tent. And I think we need to continue to do that if we want to want to win, and we want to include people in our coalition. And I think being here in Newfoundland and Labrador in this election, like Tony Wakeham is a progressive conservative, and I was just pleased to help him with his campaign. He has a vision, and he has a platform that he wanted to put forward. I believe that he'll do a good job with that, and I'm comfortable helping good people run for office.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Can we nerd out over campaign tactics a little bit?
Sure, I can
Yeah,
try.
because I'm an old fucker now, and this business has passed me by, so I'm trying to learn from people that are still practicing. What's your approach and by the way, like I just need to say, like you've taken on tough campaigns. I was very impressed with Alberta and very impressed with Newfoundland. So you've taken on tough campaigns. So I really do want to learn what you think the secret sauce is. And let's start with advertising.
Mhm.
Um, what's your approach to it? How much of the budget does it take up? What does it look like, and where does it run? And how do you use that? How do you communicate with the population these days?
So I'll say, so first of all, yeah, I've never gone into a campaign with a lead. I wouldn't even know what to do, I guess, if I went into a campaign with a lead. All of our situations, Alberta, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, we've been behind. And for the two Atlantic provinces, Alberta was a fully funded campaign where we could look at the $3 million budget. For New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador, I mean, we're looking at between 600 and $700,000 out of a cap of, 1.2, 1.3. Our advertising for this one would have been around, so let's say it was like a $550,000 budget or $600,000 budget. I mean, it was 200 to 250. It was a significant chunk.
Right.
And that's another thing just to kind of, and this is public if anyone wishes to go, run the numbers on the ad bank for Facebook. The Liberal Party, for whatever reason, and I'm sure they're going to catch this in their, whatever sort of postmortem they're doing, because it's a very obvious one and it's been blogged about and so on, is they've they just didn't advertise digitally. I mean, they did some Google ads clearly, but on Facebook, like we outspent them by like a factor of 10, I believe. I mean, or maybe it was 8.
Where were they? Where were the Liberals on television?
I guess. Like, I mean, I don't watch TV, so I don't know. So, I mean, I'm sure we were all running ads on NTV Evening News and so on, and there was definitely radio ads that were happening. But and I would hear about them from time to time. They seem to do a lot more just individual campaign or individual candidate ads. So, like, hi, I'm candidate X from this district, and I'll be great because, and as opposed to a unified narrative that they're putting
Might
out
be
there.
slightly higher in Newfoundland, but nobody votes for the candidate.
It would be slightly higher for sure. Local relationships matter, but
Yeah.
no, I believe you're correct. Yes. So it was a big chunk in both those campaigns.
Right. Interestingly about Alberta, Brian Topp told me that
Mm,
they had sort of separated their campaign and they were going to do their um, positive stuff through earned media and their negative stuff through paid media. And they realized at the end of the campaign that nobody'd heard their positive, like that nobody had any idea what their platform was, that the only things people had heard are the things that they had paid for people to hear.
right. Yeah, I listened with some interest to his assessment on our advertising, and I was kind of gratified to hear it, honestly. Yeah, so because I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces in the campaign, and so to know that the ads landed and it was punching through, it was yeah, encouraging to hear.
um, I think the thinking about the use of leaders tours has started to evolve significantly in the last sort of few cycles. Um,
Mhm.
and it's something that consumes a lot of resources, but it's normally been the centerpiece of a campaign. What's your view about leaders tours?
So I think it depends on the leader and it depends on how you want to use them. Like I will, give, I think, federally, I thought the leaders tour was excellent in terms of what it was doing in terms of capturing data, which is something that I can, just drool over where, you have all these people coming to events and they're all, just happily handing you information about how to reach them so that they can volunteer and take lawn signs and things like that was super smart and played to the strength of the federal leader. In our situation, our leaders tour, I mean, first of all, the media market is, I know it's shrinking across the country, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, I mean, we're down to there's two TV stations. The main flagship radio station that goes across the province does not have the resources to travel much outside of St. John's. So we were setting up our audio with them so that they could, legitimately
Right.
get the audio every day and so on. And
And probably
and
starting in St. John's with an event most days.
not us, no, because our
Nope.
path to
Yeah.
victory was our path to victory was outside of St. John's.
Right.
So, instead what we would do is, like I would meet with editors on a regular basis and say, okay, next week, to plan ahead, here's what's going on and here's where we'll be. And it's interesting too, just on that, where people made a big deal about the bus. And again, the Liberals really fixated on this bus. You could see how much online or, they were really bragging about having a bus, and it was so strange because I'm like, well, that first of all, that's like 60 to 80 to, and actually they had a fleet of other smaller buses that other ministers were taking around to different places, which
oh.
I
Oh,
again,
the always influential auxiliary tour.
yeah, secondary tour, tertiary tour, whatever. It was going all over the place.
That's make
And so
work
I'm
in a
like,
campaign. That's a make work project.
and yeah, and for what value? I don't know. I mean, they
Yeah.
can talk to there. I won't talk. I shouldn't talk too much for them, I guess. But we had what we call the Wakeham wagon going across the province, and it was able to get in all these small communities where people leadership doesn't normally go, and we spent our time outside of St. John's. So I mean, yeah, we had the routine of a daily press announcement and scrum, announcing whatever platform or whatever message was for that day. And then it was, using time to have the leader reinforce our narrative. I mean, we had the three pillars of better healthcare, lower taxes, and safer communities. And so he would always go around and do things that would reinforce that, and meet with influential people in different communities and different businesses and so on. And really, a lot of that was, I mean, you talk about the purpose of Leaders Tour, it was to generate wonderful visuals that were attractive, that would get traction online, and give that as an opportunity to reinforce all of our narrative. So that was our plan for Leaders Tour. And then in the final days we had what we called our Drive to Victory, which was coming out of the debate. Both campaigns were eager to show momentum and say that they were the ones with the shot of governing. We chose a very aggressive tour strategy to go and take the leader into districts, as they're called here, instead of ridings, but districts where we had no business of winning, and actually picked up one of those, in the final count. So, things that people had written us off from in places. So yeah, it was to send a message, basically, was where the leader was going.
The following is a political advertisement. To build a strong Canadian economy, we need a Made in Canada plan. Public service workers power our economy. They support small businesses and keep our supply chain moving. Canada's economic resilience relies on having strong public services. To strengthen our economy, we need to invest in public services. Learn how at forucanada.ca. This message was paid for by the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
How do you do voter ID these days? I'm old enough, because I like to talk about how old I am now, because now I'm old and I like to talk about how old I am. I got involved in politics when you went door to door with a piece of paper, with the electoral sheet, and you marked on the, like, with your hand, with a pencil on the piece of paper, right? Now there's no volunteers anymore. I don't know if Newfoundland's like that or New Brunswick's like that, but generally there's no
Everywhere is like
volunteers
that.
anymore. You cannot have poll captains who are going to cover the riding and all that kind of stuff. So how do you do voter ID now?
Yeah, so it's the same principle that's there. And you're absolutely right. Volunteerism in politics is it's dying. And I mean, we could speculate as to all the reasons why. And I believe it's across party lines. I believe it's across, like it's consistent everywhere I've seen across the country. Even though people feel very passionately about politics, the idea of walking around. I mean, yeah, when I first started, door knocking in the late 90s, there were poll captains, and there were people who would hit every door in a poll and have three people, like they'd be out like 5 nights a week or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
right.
that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen now. And so you do have to, you still should try to build up your volunteer base, but I think there's a lot more room. Professionalization of door knocking even is something that we're doing more and more. Where, like, I tell candidates, I mean, not to give away too much, but I guess if you're going to pay anybody to do anything on your campaign, do the thing that's going to get the biggest impact,
Right.
basically. But it's the same principle of taking your voter list, and whether it's through an app or whether it's printed off. And I'll say here in Newfoundland and Labrador, with cell service being the challenge that it is, we did look at a mobile app and tried to use that, because it does save all the work of data entry and everything. Because that used to be the ordeal, right? Everyone come back to the campaign office, drop off all the sheets, and some poor bugger had to sit there and like
Yeah.
X X X X, or scan barcodes. Like that was the special thing that got developed. Now, if you can do that right into an app, then it's all going straight into your system, and it's simultaneous, and you can generate updated walk sheets the next day, or walk lists that have all the new people
Right.
removed from it. But in this situation, we were back and printing them off and taking them out, and someone having to enter it.
Okay, cool. Now, last question about the Newfoundland election, which is, you said the issues you ran on were better healthcare, lower taxes, and safer communities.
Yeah.
Well, who can be against this, right? These are the most mainstream issues imaginable. But you have also been associated with hot button issues, with wedge issues in your campaigning. What's the role of those?
So, I mean, the role of any hot button issue is to identify people who are on your side, and hopefully to be able to, identify them and keep them mobilized and motivated, and to communicate with them on an ongoing basis about how you're, taking action on their issue. I don't know if anyone does that, perfectly, because there needs to be more to it than just sort of something catchy, online. But it's important, but it's not the only tool in the toolbox for sure. And I do think you have to kind of decide at different times, like, um, you know, right now here in Newfoundland and Labrador, I can just speak to the latest one. I mean, there have been hot button issues, certainly in Alberta and New Brunswick, there were, several. There were fewer in this situation. It was truly, and there wasn't much appetite for it. So just sort of reading the room, like there were really no hot button issues. And I will say this to the credit of both leaders, I did not really see many personal attacks at all, even from candidates. It was very much we believe we can do better, and they, the other side saying no, like we're the team to carry on with
Is that
this,
part of
and
the
the
culture,
company.
or is that actually bad practice? Because I believe in negative ads.
It's, um, well, yeah, and I guess this is it depends on what you mean by hot button and negative ad, because I will say this, like, I have put forward some stuff that I consider pretty milk toast to people, and they cringe and they'll say, oh my gosh, like, I can't put this attack ad out there that says, I'm like, all it's got is a picture. Like, I'll go to New Brunswick, for example, where showing candidates a flyer that we had where it was basically like, split screen, red, blue, smiley, happy PC team over here who's gonna, cut your HST and do this and do that. And then on the other side was the Liberal record with a not so, maybe not so happy photo of the Liberal leader. And oh my gosh, it was, like, for some people that is an attack ad. For other people, if you're just punching the person in the face, that's okay. Then you've stopped short of, crossing a line. So it really depends what you mean. We certainly
If
did
I'd been
lots of
running the Liberal
contrast pieces.
campaign, we'd have been clubbing your leader over the head repeatedly, because I believe that the only way late-term governments get reelected is if the alternative's unacceptable to most people. And
Yeah,
so the job is to make the
yeah.
opposition not an acceptable alternative.
And they did not do that. So, and so I guess that was the other part where we didn't have to count. Like, I mean, our approach would have been, I think, more, we won't punch first, because like, we had a situation where our leader had been opposition leader for a couple of years. And so, of course, what does an opposition leader do? An opposition leader opposes, an opposition leader votes against things, talks about shortcoming of the government. So people would say, well, he seems like an angry individual, or what have you. And so really, we spent the time when we were under much closer scrutiny, just letting, the leader be the leader. And he was much more premier-like. And, we were able to kind of present him in that way on all of our digital channels and our events on day to day. And you're right, if no one's coming against that, then it definitely made the job, easier than it could have been alternatively. Yeah, we had no shortage of contrast pieces on our channels, and certainly there was an issue where the Liberals, for whatever reason, decided to pass a secret bonus for ministers who were retiring or resigning or not running again, and that got leaked. CBC ran a story on that over the summer, and that actually became a major sticking point for them that stuck with them. And we did ads highlighting how much
Shockingly.
money. Yeah, I know. Our ads worked well on that regard, I guess.
um, so you alluded to it briefly, but as I understand it, you are not just a devout Christian, but a former Baptist minister. Is that correct?
Yes.
What point in your
Yes.
life were you a minister? Because I missed that in the chronology.
Yeah, I guess I didn't lay that out. So I was, like I've always kind of had, well, not always, but in my adult life, I guess I've had sort of lay leadership roles within whatever church I've been involved with.
Right.
And in so from '06 to '08, when I was in the minister's office for the first time, that's when I was full-time political staff. And then when the election happened in '08, it was the same time that there was a leadership change happening in my home congregation in Ottawa. And so I stepped into that role on sort of an interim basis. So I stepped out of full-time staffing at that point in time. I was doing part-time there,
Mm.
and I was jumping into different offices. And that's when you talk about, the list that you were referring to of, Canon and Prentice and Rate and so on. I mean, that's when I was in, a bunch of their offices helping out for, specific amounts of time and on different projects and working there. I went back in. So it was a course between 2008 and then 2011. 2011, we won the majority, and we had hired people that we needed to hire within our congregation, within our church, a new pastor, and so on. And so I transitioned back into government around 2011.
Did you know that Canada is a global leader in the production of medical isotopes? Canadian isotopes are life-saving tools used around the world every day to diagnose and treat cancers, sterilize medical equipment, and advance medical research. For decades, Canadian nuclear innovation has powered breakthroughs across healthcare, industry, and research. And today, through the Isotopes for Hope campaign, the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council is working to double our isotope production by 2030. Why? Because the world is counting on Canada. Medical isotopes are a promise that patients will get faster, more accurate diagnoses, a promise that hospitals will have the tools they need to precisely treat cancer and other diseases, and a promise that Canada will continue to lead in the development of nuclear technologies that benefit people here at home and around the world. From our CANDU power reactor fleet to our accelerator network, from research labs to hospitals, Canadians are driving innovation that brings hope and saves lives. By supporting Isotopes for Hope, we're not only securing Canada's leadership in the global isotope market, but we're also helping build a healthier future for everyone. The world is counting on us, but we can only rise to this challenge if we work together. It will take all of us, industry, the healthcare sector, governments, and the scientific community, all aligned to maximize the potential of Canadian-made isotopes and ensure that we continue to bring hope to patients when they need it most. Learn more at www.canadianisotopes.ca. Protestant Christianity in the States has become very political, it appears to me. I'm
Yeah.
not an expert, but it appears like it's become quite political for a religion. I'm a Catholic, and there was really not much politics in my religious background. Is that the case in Canada too?
Not nearly as much, and I would say that there's a small number of congregations that would be overtly political, but they're very, very few and far between. In fact, well, it's almost while there's probably generally more conservative leaning people in congregations, talking about politics in Canada in the church is really, it's not welcome. Most pastors that I know, in in the evangelical church, will pray for the leader of our country, whoever or whichever party they're with.
Right,
They take that scriptural command seriously. They pray for mayors, they pray for, leaders at the provincial level, all those things.
right.
I and every once in a while I hear about how, we're American style this or American style that. Well, I will say my wife and I, after the New Brunswick campaign, we had booked a trip away, so I could breathe again for a little while. And we went to a church in a deeply democratic state. But boy, oh boy, I'd never seen anything like it before. It was a small congregation. It was not, it was not a mega church or anything like that. But what we heard, like, our jaws dropped, and we're both political people. We would be okay, I would have been comfortable with a little bit of a nod to the, because this was, oh yeah, I should have said, like, this was the Sunday before the election,
Right.
that we were there, and basically the pastor got up and I, I mean, I'm not even paraphrasing. Like, if you don't vote for Trump, like, the country is going to end. I mean, it was really, and I don't mind someone having a stance, and I don't even mind someone saying you need to get out and vote. I'm comfortable with that. But this was listening to talking points that I've heard on American podcasts, by spinners. Like, it was to that level.
Right.
I've not seen anything like that in Canada. In fact, I feel that sometimes because of the rules with CRA, um, we the about partisan political activity, there's almost an overcorrection where people don't want to take a stance on just issues in general because they're worried that that they'll lose their charitable status or what have you. I remember once when I was serving as pastor of my congregation, I invited an MP in to speak who was a former Bible translator and a former pastor as well, and he was just going to come. He was just going to speak a normal sermon. He wasn't coming in to say vote CPC this year, and getting frantic messages from our, some of our financial team going, what's going on and what
Yeah,
are you
yeah, yeah.
doing? What's happening here? So, no, I don't see it nearly. I just don't see it here in Canada.
Can I ask you to just step away from politics for a second? Because
Sure.
you're a person I'm interested in hearing from on this subject. Because you've got, as a political campaigner, you've got to be an observer and a student of society. And you also have this religious background. What do you feel? How do you feel? And what do you think the implications are for Canada and our society of the dramatic decline in participation in the Christian faith in Canada over the last generation?
So that's a fascinating question that I'm probably not incredibly qualified to speak to, but I can offer a few thoughts. And I do think one of those points is the volunteerism. And again, I want to be careful when I start this to say, like, I believe that other faiths as well would encourage, positive civic behavior. Um, but like when I was growing up, volunteerism was just something that was sort of expected of people. You kind of understood that you did something somewhere to help somebody, and that could be different levels of things. But you would donate to causes, and that you would help. And certainly, I will say that there are many people of faith who will donate and give their time and so on. But I think as fewer and fewer people have that sort of foundation, and again, like, this is why it's very difficult to talk about these topics, because there's so much nuance. Because I certainly don't want to
Right.
imply that people who don't have a faith background don't volunteer or give to good causes, but specifically, this was something that was taught to people going to Sunday school or going to church, was you are supposed to help other people, and you should find ways to do that. And so even people who were reluctant churchgoers or just
No, I mean,
went,
I know exactly what you're talking about because as a
yeah,
kid, I was just an altar boy, just by
mhm,
definition. Right?
right,
And you're going to be an altar boy, right? You're going to
mhm,
sing in the choir. You're going to do a bunch of stuff, right? Just because that's part of your
yeah,
job of being in the
yeah.
church. Hmm.
That's right. And so it was like, let's help out with this. And of course, if different churches and congregations have, programs and things that help, like my home congregation has an ESL program that it participates in. It's part of the broader, City of Ottawa initiative and so on. And they're looking to get more people plugged into that, and that helps newcomers to Canada get adjusted to so they can integrate even better into the city. So um so it's someone who's standing up front saying, on Thursdays we do this, and if you can help us with that, that would make a difference for these people. And so it's almost just like there's a more corporate way to engage people in volunteerism and so on.
Right.
So I think that's one part.
Yeah, it's just such a massive social change. I'm really fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Um, Listen, we are running out of time, but I've got to turn federal for you for a little bit. First of all, you come from a region of the country that was a pretty reliable supporter of the old PC party.
Mhm.
Atlantic Canada was good PC party territory, and it is a region of the country that had a difficult time reconciling it with the successor party, the Conservative Party of Canada. What's your
Mhm.
analysis of that?
Yeah, like, we had a very strong connection to the legacy party, like the PC party federally. And I don't know if I want to out the member of my family, but anyway, someone, had, so back when I flirted with liberalism, I guess, in my early years. There was a family member of mine who was very disappointed because they had been involved in the PC party growing up, and that was it. And so then when I flipped to become a CPC voter in 04, well, then they were disappointed because, well, this is not the PC party. I was like, I don't know what I got to do. Just win your approval. So that's probably a separate,
Yeah.
therapy call. But yeah, I do think, look, I think we get better the more, strong local MPs we have, and I mean, certainly we have, three great ones here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We have great MPs. My home
But the
riding.
difference between an Atlantic Canadian conservative and an Alberta
Right.
conservative is massive, and you've worked in both places, so you know that. Like
There is.
it's a very different worldview.
Yes. What's your question?
My assertion is that the federal conservatives are too intellectually dominated by Alberta.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's just why we just need to continue to build. But I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the assertion, I guess, but it's definitely it's a force for sure, and rightfully so. But part of the reason that is so strong is because there is a high level of frustration with the federal government, and especially the current, liberal government. So that they are more motivated, I believe, to kind of get involved and try to, to have a change in government. But I I know I believe that we're stronger when we're all working together and we have different parts of the country. And I think, I was glad to work here on a PC campaign and see that that there were people from the federal side of things who were helping out provincially. And I think we can continue to build on that. And definitely there's differences, but I think that should make us stronger. Um, but does it always? I guess that's a question that smarter people than me can tackle.
Sure. Okay. Listen, I'll retreat to a less leading question. How would you, like, there's a potential election coming up, right? Could be an
Yeah.
election over this budget, could be an election this spring. It feels like a volatile minority situation. How would you position the federal conservatives to defeat Carney?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I am going to have to sort of be a little less than helpful on that one because we do have a current leader who, has, just like he's asked many people, he's asked my thoughts on things, and so I, I give my thoughts and feedback on the current leader who's running for re-election. So I don't want to be sort of a public spokesperson on offering thoughts if I think he can use them to help win the next election. So
Well, I'm just going to
I
assume from that you're recommending change.
I believe that we should always be looking for how to improve on our campaigns and how to improve on our results.
Right.
So for sure, but I do think just understanding the issue sets and continuing to hammer on, like it's very. I mean, I'll say this in terms of the potential of an election. I don't think it really benefits anyone. I think it would be very even risky for the Liberals to go ahead and trigger this right now, even if the thought of being able to force it to get that elusive majority is tempting. I think if they are seen as forcing something within a year, I don't know, but that's just my take on
I
it.
think the minor
But
parties would be in real trouble in an election. I mean, not that they aren't now, but the NDP could be wiped out. I mean, because I think that if you have another election this quickly, people are going to say, well, I guess we have to make a choice.
especially if you're leader free. I
Yeah.
mean, how does that go? Like, how do you even sort of jump into the stage there and say, we are a viable option when you're looking? So yeah, the timing of that, I think, would motivate them to. I'm not an NDP advisor by any stretch of the imagination. I don't believe they'd want me, but I just don't see how they would withstand an election right now for sure. I mean, we could hold our own and do our part for sure and challenge for the win. But yeah, for them it would be very difficult.
So you know him well and you've worked with him, so this is probably a difficult question for you to answer, but talk about it in any way you feel comfortable talking about it. Is he the right leader? Should the party keep him? Polyev.
Yes, absolutely. So I did work, with then Minister Polyev I believe his vision for the country is solid. I believe that he understands our party, understands our base. You know, was able to get a higher result, and I know, you know, I mean, yes, who could have seen that, like 41%, if anyone received 41%, if we'd sat there, you know, a year before the election and said one party was going to get 41%, we all would have assumed that that was a majority. So, you know, I believe that he has taken an approach of, you know, talking to people, asking for feedback. I believe he will, you know, continue to build. I do believe that also, I mean, the dynamic with the current prime minister is going to be very interesting to see, because he did run on I'm the guy to get this done and to manage it. And at some point in time, if nothing comes of that, then I think that's a lot harder to, you know, to keep that as one of your you know, value adds, I guess, as a, you know, as a leader. And then it gets back down to, well, if no one can really get anything out of Trump, and we're just sort of letting, you know, he's just going to do whatever he's going to do, Trump's going to Trump, then okay, let's look at the two leaders and who's actually proposing things on issues that matter. And that's when we get back to cost of living and crime and those types of things, where I believe that we
Yeah,
have a
that's sort of
strong
where I was
position.
going with you on the positioning question, which is there's these two narratives that are competing to be the ballot question. One of them
Mhm.
has to do with real micro
Yeah.
household things, whether it's crime in your neighborhood or the cost of living, right?
Yeah.
And those were the issues that were driving people to vote conservative or think about voting conservative
Mhm.
in the last election. And then there was this massive, holy shit, how do we deal with the United States? And we're going to have to totally redesign our economy. Who can do
Mhm.
that? And those were the issues that were driving people toward Carney and the Liberals. So I'm interested going into an election now, whether the Conservatives want to drive the micro stuff to be the dominant issue, or whether they want to swift boat Carney on the uh, America stuff, because it's two
So
different. It's two possibilities, and they're very different. But I mean,
yeah, but you refer to it as the micro stuff, and so that I might challenge that a little bit, which is just, it's the same as, I mean, there's a
so I don't mean
parallel
by
here.
that, I don't mean
No,
small.
no,
I mean it's not macroeconomics, it's microeconomics. It's
fair. I guess I just mean that, you know,
you
the
know
parallel that we had here in Newfoundland and Labrador was, you know, this was a big picture agreement with Hydro Quebec, and it's, you know,
yeah
it's going to shape everything, and you know, and like, and they did try to make those connections to healthcare and so on, you know, to say this is how it'll be funded, but people were not taken with it. People were taken with that other issue in the last election.
yeah
It was very clearly, it did come out of nowhere, and while these other things obviously retained a very broad base of support, we then had, you know, a group sort of, you know, break off of seniors, for example, you know, senior men in particular, which, I mean, when has that ever happened before? You know, it's been a long time, I'm sure.
yeah
And you would know maybe more as a pollster, but the
the
so in
90s,
terms of yeah,
the
so
90s.
building that back, yeah, and when there was division
Yeah.
and splits and all those as well. So um, I do think it's a matter of listening to what people are really concerned about, and crafting your message that way, and that worked for us, and I think in general it works for people in elections. Now, last time was a real boy. I mean, there were just a lot of issues that came forward at that in that one
It's one of the
in
most
a very
remarkable
short period of
elections
time.
in Canadian history.
Absolutely
Right.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Steve,
people have a lot of ideas on how to do that from the comfort of their armchair. And you know, as a campaign manager, how wonderful it is to hear from people who have just the simple thought. You know, if you just do this, just get your message out. You know, it'll all be fine. So, you know,
the one
it's
thing
great
that
to
I
hear.
do know is that all of us commentators
Mm.
never know all of the variables that the
That is,
campaign is having to consider, right? And generally, people running campaigns are smart, and if they do things, they've done them for a reason. And
yes.
so I think people get overjudged that way. But hell, we've got a daily show to do. So Steve Outhouse,
Uh,
thank you for doing this. This was a
hey, thanks for
blast.
having me on. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I can't
It's a
believe
lot
we're
of fun.
meeting virtually, and maybe we can meet for a beer sometime. That would be
That'd be
terrific.
great. I'd love
Yeah.
that.
thank you for doing this. It was really informative. And listen, all you Herle Burly-ites, this was a big treat. I want to thank our sponsors, and I really want to thank Steve Outhouse. And we'll see you next week with more Herle Burly, but it won't be like this. It'll be different. See you then.
Herle Burly.